You're alright, you wee muckers, what's the crack? I did it. I finally fulfilled my lifelong dream of becoming a TV host. Though the way that one went, I thought it was a nightmare. But Joshua, you may be asking, how did you get to become a TV host? Weren't you just some silly YouTuber? Well, it all started whenever video games became the most valuable entertainment media. Everybody wanted a piece of that pie, including W.S.W. cable TV, or who still watches cable TV for long?
After decades of mocking video games, they decided to allow TV time for video game related content, hosted by cheesy gaming scissors, the Let's Player, but after a scandal of him cheating due to using an emulator, he got his show axed after the backlash it received from viewers, though the network didn't really care about that. All they cared about was Nintendo threatened to sue them for emulation. So they put out an ad saying that who they thought would be the most marketable was going to get the slot. And I guess putting all those tags in the video paid off, because they picked me!
But to all you fans of cheesy gaming scissors, don't think of me as a replacement, just think of me as a spiritual successor. And I'm going to show you why that's a good thing, in the only form I know how, talking about video games.
A spiritual successor, sometimes called a spiritual sequel, is a product or fictional work which is similar to or directly inspired by another previous work, but does not explicitly continue the product line or media franchise of its predecessor, and thus is only a successor in spirit. Spiritual successors have often been similar in themes and styles to their source material, but are generally a distinct intellectual property.
Yeah, now that I'm a TV host, I can plagiarise small creators like Wikipedia. So now that we're a big TV show and the network only gives us a budget of $10 per episode, we're going to need some sponsors. So this episode is sponsored by Dogpile.
Here, you ever been angered when you search on Firefox and what you want is on Bing? All that time you spent searching for the right search engine? Well, now you don't have to, as there's a new alpha search engine in the pound, Dogpile. Dogpile is the new amazing way to search online with its sleek and futuristic design. Instead of making up its search results, it just steals them from other search engines such as Google, Yahoo, Yandex, and even Bing, meaning you'll never have to use another search engine ever again. But that's not all. Dogpile also has favorite fetchers, which allows you to see what everyone else is searching, stimulating the VPN industry, as not only do you have to worry about companies, governments and hackers finding out your personal information, but also your neighbours. It also has the yellow pages, so even your granny can join in the fun. So head on over to Google and search up Dogpile today to receive a new experience in search engines. Now, back to spiritual successors. The creation of a spiritual successor is usually due to the lack of an IP. Why else would you spend the time, money and resources creating a new franchise when you could just make the 29th FIFA? Also, if the IP is still being made, then what's the point in making a spiritual successor whenever you could just play the old one? To be considered a spiritual successor, a game usually has to be created by at least some of the people that worked on the original game. And what do you get when your entire team is made up of former employees that worked more overtime hours than regular hours?
What do you mean that doesn't narrow it down? The one that made the mascot platforming duo that wear each other's backpacks. Not Insomniac, the one bought by Microsoft. Okay, you know what? It's Rare. We're on a time limit here.
Rare. The only company that helped Nintendo on the N64. After starting many amazing franchises, they got scooped up by Microsoft and supported their franchises by making everyone's favourite miscreant of the family. So a couple of their employees decided to make their own company, Playtonic Games, and decided to make their own Banjo-Kazooie sequel, but without the fur. So they launched their play on Kickstarter asking for $175,000. Considering most Kickstarters don't even make it 5,000, it was doomed to fail.
They got it in 40 minutes.
Clearly Playtonic had hit the right nerve, gaining over 2 million in total. Unfortunately, it's not as easy to please Banjo fans as it is to take their money, as most of the Kickstarter funders weren't too happy. They wanted a Banjo and Kazooie game, not just a Gex and Aero crossover called Yooka-Laylee. As someone who wasn't born when the Banjo and Kazooie games came out, I think it's pretty good. It was a bit short with only 5 words, but apart from that, I didn't have any problems with it. But the first 2 Banjo and Kazooie games were better in my opinion. It was remarkable in another way though, in the fact that it was one of the first in the new age of 3D platformers. The game did well enough to spawn a sequel called Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, a spiritual successor to one of their other games, Donkey Kong Country, and changed into a 2D platformer.
It's a bad sign if you hit your midlife crisis at 2.
Rare employees are no strangers to leaving the company to start a new one, with Free Radical Design being the first to do so, creating the Time Splitters series being a spiritual successor to Perfect Dark, which itself was a spiritual successor to GoldenEye 007. There was a spiritual successor to a spiritual successor created? How'd you lose the rights twice? Well, starting with the first of these games, Perfect Dark was created due to the success of GoldenEye. However, they couldn't make it in the same universe as James Bond without the license, so they changed up the setting and characters, creating Perfect Dark. But enough sucking up, let's whine a bit. The controls, oh, I really don't like them. It might be because I'm used to the controls of newer first-person shooters. You can tell me that all you want, but at least have the courtesy to include a second control stick, then I'll take you seriously. This wasn't a problem exclusive to Perfect Dark. Most N64 games could have marketed themselves as giving off the experience of being drunk. GoldenEye, W.S.W. and Perfect Dark were revolutionary for first-person shooters, yes, but so was Final Fantasy 1 for RPGs. It's that they are still good games, just not 97 on Metacritic. Though I've only played the second one, Time Splitters is the best out of the lot, and all because of the controller. They say the best things come in threes, but two's good enough. I've only played the second one, but it holds up well because of this. Like Ukulele being released due to the lack of Banjo and Kazooie games for 16 years, having to wait almost 5 months in here in the UK after Perfect Dark released. That's some level of impatience. It did well enough to spawn 2 sequels, the third being published by EA, who said they were big huge fans of the games before not marketing the game at all in favour of GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which EA openly admitted is the worst game.
Yeah, market the bad game instead of the good one. Who knew EA's marketing division was on strike in 2005?
Well, let's stick with first-person shooters, moving on to one of the best, BioShock, which is a spiritual successor to System Shock, and you all called this game original. BioShock obviously needs no introduction, set in an underwater utopia and later a sky one, except they're not utopias, more like 1960s mental hospitals set in the 60s. System Shock, well, it's a little less known. Said to be influential nowadays for first-person shooters, Kevin Levin and other former employees of Looking Glass Studios developed the second game only for Microsoft Windows. It received critical acclaim, but not commercial. I mean, what did they expect? Microsoft give away anything for free to anyone with a C2K account? Why buy it and play it at home when you could just play it in HE? So EA turned down another game, forcing BioShock to come out. What a tragedy. Too bad I hate Shakespearean plays, or I could have made a fortune off of this. BioShock did what System Shock couldn't, made money. To this day, BioShock is not only considered one of the best first-person shooters of all time, but one of the best games. And whether or not someone is validating whether or not video games are art, BioShock's always used as an example, though this never works as critics only like bad art, so we should probably be using Sonic 06 as an example instead. It's true to say that BioShock surpassed System Shock, becoming its own thing instead of just a follow-up. But Assassin's Creed did more than that, becoming 2/3 of Ubisoft's identity. Being the spiritual successor to Prince of Persia, you may not see the connection at first, but on closer inspection you'll see that both are first-person stealth action games, both are set in medieval Middle East, both are mostly set in reality with a bit of magic thrown in, both have time travel or something similar thrown in, both had awful movie adaptations, and both were made by Ubisoft.
I just can't help but feel sorry for them.
Even with all these similarities, these two games are still more unique than modern Ubisoft ones. Assassin's Creed wasn't born out of any reasons that the developers couldn't make a new Prince of Persia sequel. No, they kept on making these until 2010. The reason why Assassin's Creed was made was the reason why this game could never be made today. At one point, Ubisoft were thinking of making a new Prince of Persia game where you played as an assassin. However, 2008 was a different time, and false advertising wasn't as mainstream in gaming as it is today, so instead of feeling guilty over selling an assassin game that said Prince,
because Ubisoft have morals.
So they changed around a few things, making Assassin's Creed, and a second one, and a third one, and also 9 more for fun. So Ubisoft gained their biggest hit by not falling into false advertising, whereas nowadays, they'll show the trailer even before starting development. One company still ignore false advertising is From Software, who coincidentally have done the whole spiritual successor thing, with Dark Souls, which was a spiritual successor to Demon Souls, which was a spiritual successor to Kingsfield. There are 2 spiritual successors to spiritual successors? Yes, but it wasn't because of licensing issues this time, at least not for the first one. From Software still owned the license to Kingsfield. One of the creators, Mikazaki, wanted to make a dark fantasy game that was unlike modern games, otherwise known as hard, creating a pushback against the filthy casual gaming that had plagued the industry. But he took the hard idea a bit too literally, creating a completely new franchise instead of just making a sequel. From Software couldn't decide on the publisher, so they decided to let someone different do it for each territory. Demon Souls was well received and sold well, so they were going to make a sequel. Well, it's too bad that one of those publishers was Sony, meaning that they couldn't do it without making it a PlayStation exclusive. So they changed half the game to be able to publish it on Xbox consoles, but don't worry, its difficulty still had the ability to flood a desert when you give it to a games journalist. Dark Souls was so successful that not only did it get 2 sequels, but it created its own genre that had games which came out before it in it. However, this is a great spiritual successor, as it's basically just a sequel but with spelling errors. Now, keeping on the topic of demons, let's go to the next game in our franchise, Devils May Cry. The hack and slash series is well beloved for its stylish action and amazing voice acting. Originally meant to be a new style of Resident Evil, it was a bit too Devil May Cry to be Resident Evil, so it became its own highly successful franchise. Now, the series creator, Hideki Kiyama, left Capcom and formed Platinum Games with only a few other people, creating Bayonetta, which not only did he replace the theme with angels, but also the developer. Getting the game published by Sega, it became Platinum Games' best-selling game. Most people will be proud of that, but Platinum aren't people. They made Star Fox Zero, forcing Nintendo to publish the second one exclusive to the Wii U. You know, I didn't like our sales when we put the game on the popular one. Let's put it on the one that can't even outsell Zambia. Though it did well enough to get her into Smash, which is something Dante will never do.
Well, that age like CGI.
And then they shoot off the number 3, making everyone think it was Bayonetta 3, even though it was part of a 5-second countdown that only 2 of the numbers were made for. Listen, if these were real games, I think we would have heard something.
For those of you feeling physical pain after hitting yourself when finding out that those games aren't real, don't worry, because hospitals have spiritual successors too.
Theme Park was a game all about running your own theme park, bringing joy and happiness to your customers. For a follow-up game, they threw all that out the window to make a game about running a hospital. But whenever they came to researching for the game, they realised that a game about running a hospital might not be easy to sell to 5-year-olds, so they give it a bit more of a cartoony look and made up what people call fictional diseases, though they're actually real diseases. Why else would I take this job if it wasn't for the fact that I had caught TV personality? At release, the game got the best type of advertising possible. Controversy. The British Parliament still didn't understand the joke even after electing one, and the Daily Telegraph stated that it was being used to train medical professionals. Still don't know how this fit into their political narrative. Now, after over 20 years, some of the developers wanted to make a sequel, but because the original developer Bullfrog had been sold to EA, so Bullfrog got its execution in 2001, so they had to make 2 Point Hospital and get Sega to publish it. There are many improvements made over the original theme hospital, including getting the Ghostbusters license, and Sonic the Hedgehog got a job as a therapist, treating people that are suffering from trauma, like soldiers back from war, serial killer victims, and Mighty Number 9. Per Mighty Number 9, what once was supposed to be the return of the Mega Man formula is now drowned in the formula made by your minds. In the 90s and 2000s, Mega Man was everywhere with more games coming out than variants for a comic book, and then it all just stopped for about 8 years before it was revealed that everybody's favourite Astro Boy ripoff wasn't dead. But in between that, everybody was so worried that former developer Keiji Inafune took desperate measures and put up a plea on Kickstarter for funding for Mighty Number 9.
Well, this is the most interesting suicide attempt I've ever seen.
It got the funding it needed, plus 3 million more. Nobody could wait for this thing to come out, which is why they delayed it a couple of times, but it finally released on the 21st of June 2016 and the 24th in Europe. The apocalypse came 3 days late for us. It turns out that people didn't like Mighty Number 9, and I'm still trying to figure out why. It emulates what you love about Mega Man so well, as long as you only like the NES ones. Still, it doesn't make it a good game. I'm not a numpty. That's the people who backed this game.
Oh dear, I think all this toxicity's causing another apocalypse. Well, guess that gives us a reason to talk about Fallout. Oh, we're screwed.
Fallout is the spiritual successor to the popular RPG Wasteland, created after EA hoarding another license, forcing Interplay to make Fallout. What's going on? This ain't my Fallout! Yes, that's because in 2007 Bethesda bought the rights to Fallout and turned it into an action RPG. That made it more mainstream, picking up the bulk of its fans with 2008's Fallout 3. But not all the old fans were happy with this change, such as the fan site No More Mutants Allowed. It's just too bad one bought them. None of their complaints were major though, just stuff like how not enough food purchase after 200 years, and the fact that Fallout used to be all about being able to do whatever you want, unlike now where it's just where you can do whatever you want that doesn't break the game, which isn't much. Some of Bethesda's employees weren't happy about Fallout 76 though, and decided to go off and create their own spiritual successor to Fallout called The Outer Worlds. There were 3 spiritual successors to spiritual successors. The Outer Wilds is a game which is most famous for people mixing up the titles for a similar game that came out in 2019, known as The Outer Wilds. Wait. Oh, never mind. It takes the formula of Fallout, but instead of 1950s apocalypse, it's 1950s space, so the gap of realism between these is massive. But unlike the other triple spiritual successors, if there wasn't a Mando Man, then this would have went together as well as milk and water.
Tastes like the 50s. It sure is nice whenever something you thought was dead gets a new version of it. But every single game we've talked about here has been made by at least some of the members of the original creation. But they've had a massive advantage. They know how it works. But everyone else just has to trace but add their own artistic flair to it.
Usually whenever anyone does this, they just get called a ripoff. So what separates these from the rest? Well, for one thing, they're good.
Wow, this list just got shorter than my time left to live.
Okay, let's poke this hornet's nest and set it on fire. Modern Paper Mario stinks! Paper Mario, the beloved RPG, started out life like all of us, desirable. It was inevitable considering it was following up the hugely successful Mario RPG. There were 4 spiritual successors to spiritual successors? I thought corporations were supposed to be protective of their IPs. Though, this one wasn't lost. Kinda. Nintendo had loaned out Mario to Square Enix. This was done to penetrate the Western market, as most of their RPGs hadn't done so well in the West, with 0 sales in the UK. It would help if they actually published their games here though. So they used the recognisable face of Mario. A sequel was planned for the N64, but due to Nintendo's stubbornness, everybody fell out with them, including Square Enix. Because Nintendo owns Mario, they can make a sequel without them, but it'd be a bit awkward to make another kid just after splitting up, so they hid the evidence and added a gimmick: paper. You may think it's stupid, but you're the one who fell for it. Even though it released late into the N64's lifespan, it did pretty well, so it got a sequel and 4 disappointments. They're not bad games most of the time, just not Paper Mario games. So 2 developers decided to make Bug Fables the Everlasting Sapling. But there was one problem. In the year of its release, there was a Paper Mario game released. Yeah, the game came out in 2019 for Microsoft Windows, but that wasn't where the majority of people were going to buy it. Its main audience that wanted it were Nintendo fans, and no matter what it did, it was going to be compared to Paper Mario. So it was a good thing that they made one of the best games ever, with an easy to understand combat system but with enough depth to pull apart, boss fights which can be extremely tough but still feel fair, amazing character writing and world building, an abundance of well-made side quests, unique quality character design, and one of the best soundtracks ever. Paper Mario the Origami King changed the supply and demand ratio for some office supplies. There really wasn't anything to worry about. Now, obviously Paper Mario and the Origami King sold more copies. It was made by a multi-billion-dollar company with a large marketing budget, and it had the power of Mario. Bug Fables just had the word of mouth. Well, at least you won't summon the keyboard warriors when you call its name.
It's sad whenever a company stops making a product that you like, whether it be due to licensing issues, it didn't sell well, or because they're just stupid. But the thing with spiritual successors is, you can just demand somebody else make a new one. It's easy to see why this is appealing to companies. It can be hard to build up a new IP, so why not just piggyback off the old ones? I always hear people say, spiritual successors are awful and they never live up to the original. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, more times than not, the spiritual successor surpasses the original, and everyone forgets the old one. If this episode has taught us anything, it's that Kickstarter actually makes bad games. But I'm very glad at the moment. For a little minute there, I was really worried that I'd be stuck in cheesy gaming scissors shadow forever. But now I know that I'm just going to surpass him and you're all going to forget about him. I mean, look, I'm the superior product. I didn't take my name from a random name generator. With all these companies losing their IPs, I thought I might go outside and look for a couple. I mean, who knows how much I could ransom Skylanders for? But first, I want to know what you think. So phone in using this number. Here, alright you wee mucker, what's the crack?
You may not know the name now, but you will live in fear of the name Rackrat.
Hi, Rack.
Oh no, you shouldn't be. You see, I was Cheesy Gaming Scissor's biggest fan. His job was everything to me. I'm going to take revenge on you and all of W.S.W. cable TV. So I would like to announce that I've put up a play on Kickstarter for 300 million to get Cheesy Gaming Scissors back to where he belongs on primetime TV. And see you hanging from the gallows.
Alright, let me see this. Ooh, for tier 3 they've gotten origami scissors made out of cheese. Well, they got me.